Welcome to Citizens Forum. My name is Walter McGinnis. I'm the host of the show today. We have with us today two people from a group called MetroVic.ca, which is a group that's advocating for direct elections for the CRD. So welcome to the show, Christina Mitchell and Rob Wickstrom.
Wickson, sorry.
Oh, Wickson. So sorry about that. Now, the Capital Regional District is a third-tier government. It's created by the province. And the problem is that the directors of the CRD are not directly elected by the citizens. They are appointed by the local municipal mayors. Now, the big question is, how will the CRD directors be accountable if we cannot vote for them?
Well, the short answer is that they're not accountable now.
Yeah.
And the directors from the electoral areas are actually directly elected by the citizens on the islands there.
Yeah.
But in fact, Saanich and Victoria have something called a voluntary double direct system.
Yeah.
But there's a failure built into that system, because if the candidate at election time doesn't get a council seat, then that CRD director seat is also void.
Okay. Now, you know, but it doesn't still, like, we're like very concerned about a number of projects in the region and how the regional planning is going and all that. And the CRD just seems to me that it's so almost untouchable that we don't even know who the directors are, you know, even those who are interested. And it seems to me that because of this, they're so used to not being accountable that they're not making the efforts to change that.
I think there's an inbred sort of feeling that they don't want to push because they don't want to seem to be over top of the individual municipalities, and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, if you're planning for a big project, you should be the lead. You should be in charge.
Yes.
But they can't be, because the municipalities hold the purse strings, in the sense that they tell you how we're going to vote, and it's going to be about us, not about the region.
Yeah, you know, now I think a lot of times people think, okay, there's some people advocating for directly elected CRD directors, and it sounds like, oh no, another election, you know, more process that we have to get involved in. So let's just kind of look at how this would work. You say, for instance, if we were to have elected CRD, should the city councilors in these different municipalities be allowed to run in an independently elected CRD?
Not for both seats. I think it's one or the other. So if you want to run for the regional governance structure, whether it be MetroVic or CRD,
yeah,
whatever you want to call it, you run for that.
Yeah.
And you might represent a wedge in the pie, but the fact is you need to be concentrating on your duties as a regional representative,
yeah,
as opposed to a local municipality representative. But you know, you can go the other way, and you go all the way down to the neighborhood associations. They too should be part of the conversation on governance, because they too have a big role to play. They're the closest to the taxpayers.
So I don't know if we can integrate the neighborhood associations. I tend to agree with that, because I really think a lot of times some of the good things that have been worked up through the neighborhood associations and really have been identified as need for the community and play a key role. But say in electing the CRD, you're advocating for just a directly elected CRD, no city councilors, no mayors. You guys just run the CRD and do your business and let the municipalities do what they're doing. Now, if we were to have that.
Remember, municipal government's major role is land use.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
The CRD can have other roles.
Yeah.
Right? CRD can look at transportation, can look at energy.
Yeah.
You can look at health. And in our CRD, the health is part of the CRD, yeah, but it has a separate authority. Those kinds of things can be done in a different way. But remember about neighborhood associations, they don't just deal with municipalities. They deal with the province,
yeah,
they deal with the feds, they deal with the CRD, all separately from their role within a municipality.
Yeah. How are the neighborhood associations elected? We'll talk about that some other time. So if we had this elected CRD, should the jurisdictions what the CRD now has and the municipalities now have, would that just remain the same?
I think that probably the electoral areas might be shifting, and in fact Salt Spring Island, for example, is looking at a governance structure that's going to be separated, if you like to call it that.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about the other jurisdictions.
So responsibilities at the CRD level have to be higher than what's happening in municipalities, right?
Yeah.
So municipalities, okay, they're going to be in charge of putting the stop sign at the corner of this street, that street. But the regional governors should be looking at what our transportation system should look like in terms of integration. Right?
Yeah.
How do we get from here to there?
So here's what I'm sort of getting at, because I'm picturing how this would go. The CRD seems to be like have a sort of a municipal sort of category in governance, like say a third tier level. Now we come to a disagreement about some transportation issue or whatever, and the CRD saying, oh, we really need this, and the certain municipality says we don't. Would the provincial government be then allowed to step in and say, okay, this is how we're going to rule on that, or how would that work?
There could be an arbitration process or a mediation process, but I would think that once you get used to the idea of who's responsible for what, it's like we don't question transit, right? Transit has a job to do, and they come out and do it. They have a transit commission. Now, the transit commission is made up of local politicians, so it's part of the problem. But the fact is, we need to find a way to separate these two entities so that we get better progress on the things that need to be done on a regional basis. Right now, we get held up by individual small municipalities who say they want it differently. Yeah. We're going through a regional growth study revision as we speak, and I just did some reading on this the other day. The fact is, the smaller municipalities that want growth at a rapid pace are pushing to have this very well-written regional growth strategy basically weakened. They want the water systems to be able to be expanded out to places like Shirley. They want land use to be not confined to certain urban containment boundaries. They want to be able to go beyond that. But places like Sandwich are saying, wait a minute, we built it this way because we wanted to make sure that growth happened within our boundaries first, as opposed to being outside the boundaries. And you know, there's a good point to be made of how you do smart growth. And it's not about making profit for builders.
Right. You know, and I think there's a lot of interest in a lot of different projects, and we've been talking about the sewage project for so many years.
Where the province stepped in.
Seemingly has stepped in and now is appointed the, which we have here in our notes, the other committee that's now running it. But that, even the CRD, that's out of the CRD's control now. That group that are, you know, steering the sewage treatment project is a separate entity, and is basically answering to the province. So it's a strange arrangement, to say the least. One would wonder why the province didn't just say, okay, we need a sewage treatment plant, we're going to find a place to build it. You don't want it there, we're going to expropriate it. This is the way it goes, folks, sorry about that. And we'll, you know, and just handle it. But it just seems that the provincial government just loathes to take that direct action. And to me, they're abdicating their authority, where they should actually come in and say, no, we're the government. This is how it goes. And by the way, if you don't like it, it's going to be election sometime, and you can vote for somebody else. And you know, but it doesn't seem to be that way. It all seems to be so mixed up that nobody knows who to vote for or why anymore. Anyway, it's been 50 years since the creation of the CRD. And in what areas do you think the CRD has failed to provide good regional government? What are the key areas where you think they haven't done the job?
Rob's talked about transportation, and that's a huge issue. And I know Rob's has done a lot of work in the transportation area, and he can speak.
Certainly, transportation is a huge failure. The Mackenzie interchange is an example. Because the province felt that something had to be done there, they just came in and plunked down their answer. Right? It had nothing to do with the regional growth strategy. It had nothing to do with what the local community thought was important. And it's a very major issue. The fact that the province just ignored their own law, the regional growth strategy, is astounding. And they did it then just arbitrarily. But for the sewage treatment problem, tiptoed around and did this and that and made it look like, oh yeah, we're really trying hard to be doing what the neighborhoods want or what the community wants. It's just outrageous.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's other stuff going on. Like, I know the CRD picks up our recycling, doesn't it?
CRD is part of the recycling overall piece.
Okay.
So they have the Heartland landfill, that's a CRD project.
Okay.
They have the water district, that's a CRD project. They have the libraries, that's a bit of a CRD project. And I think even the cemetery out of Royal Oak are CRD projects. And they have parks and trails, right?
Yeah.
But they share things. So in the parks and trails, for example, the Galloping Goose has to be maintained in certain places by the municipalities. But some municipalities don't get involved, like the E&N Trail, which is a CRD project in conjunction with the E&N people. Or in Esquimalt doesn't do any clearing of snow on that road where they should be. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, there again is this kind of areas that where should the municipality be stepping up? In what areas should they actually be looking for assistance? And I think there's economy and scale and all that for doing some of these services particularly. And I really think, we could be looking at, in a directly elected CRD, I think we could actually expand what services we could do because we'd have a little more control over the decision making, for instance, fire protection, police.
And climate change. I mean, it doesn't have a boundary.
Really.
The climate, yes.
These issues are so massive. And you think about the sewage treatment plant as proposed, built in McLaughlin Point, is right down by the water. Does anybody ever mention to anyone that sea levels are going to rise?
We also have to shove the sludge back out to Heartland all the time. So that's an issue. So to my mind, you're right. Services that can be delivered on a regional basis should be delivered by a regional governance structure.
Yeah.
It's the most efficient way. It's obvious.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we're afraid to go there.
You know, there was a study done, and I wish I could remember the professor's name from the university here.
Bob Bish.
Rob Bish. And I read most of it yesterday just to look at what the highlights were. And, in his recommendations, although he never mentions this in the study, he says he would like to see the chairman of the CRD being elected directly.
Right. That's correct. And in fact, the current chair has publicly said that she would be interested in exploring that.
Even though all the study he did not mention that. No. We were talking about amalgamation of the municipalities.
That's the problem. You get the word amalgamation on the table, right away you get these for and against people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about good governance.
Yeah.
If we had a clean piece of paper, how would we set up governance in this region?
Yeah, and that's, I think, what we're at today. I mean, I just think it's great. It's a great idea, something that the public should be talking about more and more. I think we should be going to the city councils and bringing this up, and let people hear this idea a bit. It has so much logic to it.
And the two, sorry, Walt, the BC Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce have actually said we need direct elections to the CRD.
And apparently it's happening in Ontario.
There.
I mean, I've been trying to find the references, but I couldn't find any references. But I've heard that in Ontario, some of the CRDs are now being directly elected.
That's correct.
It's not like we're reinventing something.
It's the chair in particular that they're looking at in those jurisdictions.
You worry about loyalties, right? So if you've got 5 people from Saanich going together, and if they vote as a block, it can be real problematic for some of the smaller communities.
It's like controlling
Unfortunately, Saanich doesn't vote as a block, and even though they may want to. They seem to vote their own strengths every time. But
anyway, this subject's not going to go away quickly, and we want to keep talking about it. We're going to have you back in the future as some new developments may happen in this area. So thank you so much for coming in today, and really appreciate having you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Will.
So that completes this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back to Citizens Forum. Today I have with me Brian Burchell from Arrest, and I'm going to read this because you have to tell me every time you come. It's the Association for Responsible and Environmentally Sustainable Sewage Treatment. I'm beginning to appreciate that name more and more as we talk. And I was just on your website, and it says here, the $1 billion wastewater management scheme being foisted on us by our politicians and special interest groups will do more harm than good for the environment. And I mean, that says it all in a nutshell. So welcome to the show, Brian. Lovely to have you back again.
Thank you.
Now, the CRD now has appointed a board called the Core Area Wastewater Treatment Project Board, and this is your board that's going to apparently oversee the building of this new sewage treatment plant. And the chair of that board, the person's name is Jane Baird. Now, what was your reaction to Jane Baird's statement that she doesn't anticipate any cost overruns?
I think the name is Jane Bird, I believe.
Yeah, Jane Bird.
Yes. As soon as I heard that she was asked, do you anticipate? And she said, no, don't. I thought, what a silly question and a silly answer. The thing is, if you anticipate cost overruns, then you put them in the budget. You put them in the budget, right? So to say, oh, no, we don't anticipate any cost overruns, well, of course that's the answer, because if you anticipate it, it's not an overrun.
Yeah.
But the thing is, so what would have been a good answer to that? I wanted to go further. I think her answer is silly, but a sensible answer would rely on things like studies that have been done, and one, for example, is deception and delusion in large infrastructure projects, a 2009 study. Lots of studies, this is one of them. And what that study showed was that large infrastructure projects are typically late and typically over budget. And about 45% of them are 50% over budget.
Wow.
And about 25% of large infrastructure projects are 60% over budget. So they go over budget ordinarily when they're large. And why?
Yeah.
Because costs are ordinarily underestimated, especially when politics is involved. It's because it looks good if you underestimate it so you can get the project approved. And then revenues are usually overestimated. So they got the problem of underestimate the costs and overestimate the revenues, and then when they finally build it, oh, it's just not working as well as we predicted. Yeah. So it's deception and delusion is the title of the deception and delusion in large infrastructure projects. Another issue too, should point out, with the project board was the sell of this project that was approved by the CRD in September, at McLaughlin Point. The sell of it was, well, the zoning's in place, so we got that taken care of. Well, it turns out it's not. Yeah. Now it's been approved and they're trying to get the project underway. It turns out the CRD is having to apply to Esquimalt for an amendment to the zoning. So the sell that its zoning's in place turned out not to be true. Here's an error of, overconfidence.
Well, there was the strangest of it was that the project board came to Esquimalt, and it seems that they started to parse out every word of the zoning, and there was some issues about barging materials and such. But the strangest of it is that, because I've gone through this process of, wanting to have buildings built, and I'm in the construction industry, and I get the building permit. They say, okay, go ahead and build that building. Guess what? I'm going ahead. Yeah. I don't go back to the city and say, that sentence there, we're not really sure. And it seems strange to me that they would go and really parse this thing out. And there's some of the details were really quite obscure. Yeah. So I'm wondering what they were really doing. Anyway, we know you've been trying to get answers from the federal government, because these are the guys that are holding the purse strings, and they know everything about the science and all that. And you've asked them about what basis they've been using for basis for rebuilding this plant. Now, what is the status of the formal request for information that AREST sent to the Federal Ministry of Environment for the science they keep saying justifies Victoria's sewage treatment project?
That's correct. In my AREST ongoing correspondence with the minister, what keeps coming back is, well, the science backs the project. There's going to be environmental and economic benefits, and the science backs it. So what AREST keeps receiving from the scientists and the public health officers and the engineers is, there is very weak science to justify this project. So it's the federal government that's overseeing the regulations. Yeah. So if they're right, if the science is there, then please provide it. So we're asking, please provide the science.
Wouldn't they shouldn't be so happy to do that?
You would think so. Then we would go away if there really was valid science. But they're not answering that question when I've asked for it. Please give us the science, please give us the science. So what I did was I put in a formal, what they call request for information to the ministry. And they have to reply. The statutory requirement is to reply within 30 days. After the 30 days had expired, I then got an answer which was, we're going to take another 60 days, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So that deadline, which they're allowed to do, that new deadline was now December 17th to give me an answer, to give the science. They never replied at all. There's been nothing. December 17th came and went, and we still have no response to give us the science.
Yeah.
So on the issue of the science, I'd like to go a little further, and there's something that's out there I keep hearing frequently from people, from the press, from citizens is, well, I'm confused because the scientists can't agree on this issue. I'd really like to address that because the qualified scientists and public health officers and engineers are in very, very strong agreement that this project is a waste of time.
Yeah.
There are pseudoscientists, people who are not qualified, who are making statements that unfortunately the press is giving them equal weight. And I'd like to try to clarify some of these things. Well, one that has been brought up to me recently, there's a diver locally who keeps saying that there's the water is very turbid, and he keeps blaming the sewage discharges. The thing is that what I've just found out from one of the marine scientists is that the CRD has spent some of our money, our tax dollars, to try to prove this diver correct. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't validate the diver's claims that our outfalls are causing the turbidity in the ocean this diver is concerned about. So that's the science, in this case, does not back up somebody who is being given some credibility. That he's a diver, he's out there, he's actually seeing it, but he's interpreting it incorrectly.
Yeah.
And the media, unfortunately, is not putting that out there, that his interpretations are incorrect. An effort to actually prove him right failed.
Yeah.
Other things like this claim that the waterfront there's this vast coliform contamination being caused by our discharges. And that was back in October 2013. And that was a scientist, a respected microbiologist from UVic, who did studies and claimed that, yes, his studies showed vast contamination of the waterfront. Well, it turned out his peers who looked at his work were quite embarrassed. His work was not good. They said they would have failed a student with the work that they saw. And actually later, again, what the media didn't report was later that scientist recanted. He said that all these coliforms that he found were caused by the outfalls, and he later admitted he couldn't say that. He couldn't prove that. Turns out the CRD has done an extensive study, 13 years I believe it was, 1,700 samples, showing that the coliforms diminish from, they come out of the outfalls, and then within 400 yards they diminish down to background levels. The conditions in our ocean here are so strong, cold currents, rich with microbes, and predatory microbes, and rich with oxygen, and it attacks the discharge from our pipes, and things fall off to natural levels very rapidly.
So it is quite a strong current down off the points of land.
There's a fairly strong current. People think of the tides, which is true. The tides go back and forth, but there's actually another current that's continuous. It's caused by the Japanese current pressing against the North American coast, west coast, and it mushes into areas, bays, and so on. It comes into the straits, and it swirls around and goes right back out. So there's this continuous motion that's constantly sweeping through the Straits of Juan de Fuca. It's very interesting. But anyway, that's...
Now, you've written a letter to the Minister of Environment, Minister McKenna. What is the status of that letter?
Yes, I wrote a letter that actually emailed it on January 9th, and I backed it up with, I tweeted the letter on January the 18th as well. And basically pointed out a few things. They keep coming. One of the things I did is I complained that we haven't received from her ministry an answer to our formal information request. I'd like her to address that. But also pointed out that her ministry is managing the wastewater regulations that are supposed to be implemented here in Victoria. And what I've said, I actually asked her a question. I said, have you been to Victoria? Have you been here? I said that, you know, this is an area that is famous for its natural beauty. The tourists swarm here and so on. And I said, 5 days after we received her last letter in October, 5 days later, Victoria received another award as being one of the most beautiful places on the planet. Yeah. It's a luxury magazine, travel magazine called, I think you pronounce it Condé Nast.
Yeah.
And over 100,000 of the magazine's readers voted Victoria the 7th best city in the world.
Yeah.
As I said to the minister, do you really think we have a sewage problem and can get these constant awards all the time? It doesn't make sense.
Well, particularly because there isn't any evidence. I mean, you could lay that out and people might not be aware, but we're digging now. We're really trying to find out.
Yeah.
We're really trying to find the evidence.
I also noted that this magazine, one of the highest point that they said for Victoria is, go for a walk, a half-mile walk over the ocean on the Ogden Point breakwater. That was a highlight they pointed out. So they inadvertently, showed that there isn't a problem because the breakwater is right between the two outfalls. It's only a kilometer from one of the outfalls. Yeah. And they're saying, go there and enjoy the natural environment. And also the cruise ships. Yeah. Hundreds of cruise ships, and this year going to be more than increasing number of cruise ships, bringing hundreds of thousands of people. They're going right over those outfalls or between them and docking at Ogden Point. And there's no issue.
And you've walked down there dozens, if not hundreds of times.
And what the people that are selling our city from visitors and so on saying, go to the waterfront, which happens to be where our discharges are, but that's the point, is our discharges are having such a negligible impact on the ocean, they're not aware of it. Yeah. They're not even aware that that's where the discharges are happening.
Now, it seems to me that, this is like, I mean, governments can be bad. I mean, they can make bad decisions. We all know that. Sometimes they have bad information. But this one is just particularly, this decision they're making, they seem to think that if you hire enough public relations people and spin it enough, somehow black will become white and fiction will become the truth.
That's a good way to put it. I've thought about that, is that they, part of the problem, and actually I go back to the minister's letter, I actually put this in there. The problem is this, that it's politicians that are pushing this, and they're using misguided ideology, emotional rhetoric and so on, and pushing this. And so it's politics that are pushing this project, while the scientific community is saying, you're going to be wasting our money. So I'm trying to make this clear to the minister that you got these two forces. You got reality and you got the politics. Yeah. And part of the reason, to go back to what you just said, part of the reason I think that they're having so much trouble with this project is there isn't a problem. If you actually had a problem, you'd know your problem, you'd focus this on, and you'd find solutions to that problem. Yeah. Since we don't have a problem, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
They don't have a solution because they have, and this is something that I'll go back to one of the public health officers, Dr. Sean Peck. Yeah. He's constantly saying that is, where's the benefit? What's the problem? You got to find a problem in order to find a solution. Yeah. And you're not showing there's going to be any benefit for this billions of dollars. And the money keeps flowing. How can we stop them?
It's such a strange situation. Now, I just want to touch on one other issue, and we might go a little long here, but I think we're okay with that. You mentioned the last time you heard that arrest is considered a legal challenge. Now, has this evolved any further? Or?
A little bit, yes. Been more discussions. There seem to be several avenues to have legal challenge, and I'm certainly not going to go into that on the air. Yeah. If we finally have a case together, yes, we'll be broadcasting that. Yeah. But we're in discussions with lawyers, with other citizens, and we're trying to find, is there really a legal challenge here? Because after all, it would cost a lot of money. We would be fundraising for that. We'd be hoping. This isn't for arrest. We wouldn't be doing this because arrest wants to go after this. We'd be doing this for the citizens. If there's a legal case to do this, we'd be doing it on behalf of the citizens to try to avoid the hundreds and hundreds of dollars in extra taxes that we're all going to have to be paying for something.
Like, would this be a case being heard in British Columbia courts? Or is this a federal jurisdiction? How does this work?
I'm not sure. A target should be the CRD, since they're the body that should be complaining to the federal government. But also, the regulations themselves are flawed. The marine scientists have been very clear on that. Yeah. That for discharge, they're very good regulations for discharges into fresh water. Yeah. But they're meaningless, as a matter of fact, there is their word, for discharges into the ocean. The regulations are very flawed for discharges into the ocean, which is what we have.
Yeah.
So one thing would be to somehow get the, if it takes a legal case, to improve the federal regulations. We need that done. There's the issue of, well, the zoning in Esquimalt. Didn't the zoning for McLaughlin Point get rescinded? I was right there when it was passed unanimously by the previous council, was to rescind the bylaw that allowed for any sewage treatment plant.
Yeah.
What's happened to that bylaw? It got rescinded. So why are they now thinking of putting a plant there, since that ability was rescinded? We also have what appears to be a serious conflict of interest, where the mayor of Esquimalt is also the chair of the CRD. This isn't just an appearance of a conflict of interest. You're supposed to recuse yourself if there's just an appearance of. This is a textbook case of conflict of interest. The proponent, the applicant bringing the application for an amendment to the bylaw in Esquimalt is the representative of Esquimalt. It's an absolute.
How do you hear that fairly?
Yeah, how do you hear that fairly? The issue of, as the Focus magazine brought up, is it appears that the plant is undersized. That should be challenged. Also, it brought up that the Environmental Management Act has not been adhered to, where public consultation has not occurred as the Act requires. The failure of the CRD to abide by the guidelines for implementation of the regulations. They have not done the cost-benefit analysis. And they're saying, well, we don't have to do the cost, or a previous CRD sewage committee said, well, we don't have to do the cost-benefit analysis because the law says we have to build the plant. Well, yeah, there is a law, but within that law are along with that law are the guidelines, which says you've got to do a cost-benefit analysis.
You know, you are going to bat for the public.
So there are so many flaws in this. It would appear that the ideal would be to get an injunction and just stop everything, stop the money for a while, so this thing can properly be reviewed. It seems to be so rife with error.
It seems to be that it might be the only thing that might wake some of these people up to realize that they're going in the wrong direction.
There's so much political capital been put into this that there's going to be a huge amount of embarrassment if they're now shown to be wrong with what they've done, having spent the tens of millions of dollars of our tax money, local taxes, to push this along. If it turns out they didn't have to do that all along, they're going to look pretty silly. But as a radio show host said to me, they're already looking pretty silly.
Well, they look silly to you and I.
Yeah.
And I hope the public catches on. Brian, always a pleasure to have you.
Always good to be here.
And it's an evolving story. It just gets more interesting every week for me. So we're looking forward to having you back to fill us in on your endeavors. So that completes this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back to Citizens Forum. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the wonderful, wonderful volunteers on this show, and also the Shaw staff who've always been so helpful and treated us with respect for all these years we've been on this show. And we know we are amateurs and we're doing our very best, but we do want to get the message as best we can. So today, it's my great pleasure to have with us on the show Jack Etkin, and everybody knows Jack and his very close association with this show and how important it is to him. Now, we've always had a little segment in the past called the Walton Jack Show, in which we just go over several of the key issues that we're seeing happening in the news today. So Jack's come with us with a little list, and I think we should just go through some of these topics that you've come up with, Jack. Firstly, and this is
I'm going to start with something else.
You don't want to start with that?
No.
Okay.
I just want to follow up on what Brian Burchell was saying about sewage treatment. And I mean, one of the things he said that was as shocking as everything else is that they can't get the science from the federal government.
Yeah.
Right? The federal government's argument is the science is there, so they ask, show us the science that proves that we have any problem, and they can't get the science. So, I mean, why is the city's media not putting that on the front page and television and radio so people know this? Because it's a vitally important fact. We're about to spend $1 billion on a project that what they're saying is it does no environmental good, and the building of it is going to be an environmental disaster. So why are we doing it? And you can't get the science from the Trudeau government.
Yeah.
So today, all day long, I listen to CFAX. They led the news all day with talking about a murder that happened many years ago.
Yeah.
It's like they love to cover murder. You know, they love to put that out there. But this vitally important story, nobody is talking about.
Well, you know, I personally believe that it's a bit like a crime. At some point, there's a lot of money being stolen from the taxpayers, and it's being spent on something that we don't need. So,
you know what? I think,
you know, and this is a serious, serious issue. And here you have them right in the middle of this operation, making these decisions. They have absolutely nothing to go on, but it seems that they can just proceed on without any repercussions. It's very strange. But I have a feeling that this is the one that could really change the political culture in this area, and then maybe even Canada with the way Trudeau's acting, with all the promises he's reneged on. You know, at some point, I think the public's going to have to wake up and just realize, no, this is not fair.
well, when it comes to the issue of informing the public,
Yeah,
the unfortunate problem that we have in Canada is that all of our media is owned by half a dozen or 8 corporations. Everything in this town,
Yeah.
everything in Vancouver, everything in Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg, Regina, Calgary, Edmonton, Quebec City, Halifax, the whole thing. 8 corporate, they own every television station, every radio, and they are a special interest group. They are
Yeah.
corporate Canada. And so they control the message, and our side, whatever our side is,
yeah,
let's call our side citizens.
yeah.
We have no ability to project any truth.
We are in that era where money seems to talk, and that's our problem. But anyway,
And that situation is endemic, and it's one of Canada's biggest
Yeah.
problems. Can we get past it and succeed?
citizens' actions can do it. I
And
think.
when I say succeed, I just mean let's have more democracy.
Yeah.
Just meaning that what people want
Yeah.
is what should be happening in our
Well,
country.
you know, the public is not being informed. I want to hit a couple of your topics, Jack,
Okay.
because the one that I think we should skip right down to is the health care lawsuit in the Supreme Court of BC. Corporation Canada is arguing that our public health care is unconstitutional because people have to suffer and die while waiting for health care. Now, if they win, the odds are that at least 50-50, it will open the way for a full U.S.-style private insurance system in Canada. There's nothing been reported about that in the media, as you say, and we have one of the most important court cases in the history of our country, and because we could fundamentally change how healthcare is delivered, and for the worse in many ways, I think. So, how far along is that case, and what do you think is happening there?
Well, the case started in September, so it's been going
Yeah.
for, let's say 4 months with the Christmas break. It's one of the most important cases in Canadian history. A small private hospital in Vancouver has taken the BC government to court and is arguing that our healthcare system is unconstitutional because I don't know the words of the Constitution, but it protects your life and your happiness and all
Yeah.
of that. And so they're arguing that it's unconstitutional for people to suffer and die while waiting for health care.
But why are there's these long waiting
And-
lists?
Yeah, that's so, and they're
Yeah.
right. They may very well win that case, and maybe they should win the case
Yeah.
because the truth is that in many respects our public healthcare system is a shambles, and so. But what I believe is that our public healthcare system has been deliberately destroyed by the people who run this country, the corporations who want to take it over, and the politicians who work for them, and the media who doesn't tell us the truth. In order, it's been deliberately destroyed in order to get us to the point where nobody cares.
Yeah.
And they've done it.
Well, it
And
seems
the
like
way
it's
they
like
did
on
it-
the vine. It's sort of withering on the vine.
Yes.
It's
They're
hard
spending
to-
more and more money. People
Yeah.
have to wait. There's chaos in the emergency rooms. That's the plan. That's the plan. And the way they did it is simply to close hospital beds.
Yeah.
Between 1990 and 2003, we went from 180,000 hospital beds in Canada to 120,000 hospital beds.
Yeah.
So while the population increased by 1 million, let's say, we lost 1/3 of all the hospital beds in Canada. And with
Yeah.
the beds closed, you get exactly what you would expect. Wait lists for surgery because all the beds are full.
Yeah.
And emergency room chaos because with the hospital beds all full, nobody can move out of emergency. There's just no room. So we're spending more and more, but without the beds,
Yeah.
it can't work. They knew that. That's
And there's
why
no
they
care.
did it.
The people end up on the street.
Yeah.
Statistics show that 75% of people living on the street have some mental health challenges, some medical issue that put them on the streets. So I mean, it all just flows that way. We have a society that's in chaos, and we're always constantly trying to pick up the pieces.
So they're making the case in BC Supreme Court that our healthcare system is unconstitutional, and they may very well win. I mean, literally nothing in the media. Somebody sent me a few stories written by Ian Mulgrew, who's a reporter, and there have been some stories. I mean, it's not that there's absolutely zero, nothing.
Yeah.
But even I, who am looking for this stuff, have seen and heard nothing. It's just not there. So people don't even know the case is taking place.
Yeah.
It's just another example of everything that's wrong. They want to destroy our healthcare system. They have destroyed it. Now they want to privatize it, and they don't even tell us.
Well, if they had some model, say for instance, if the U.S. model of healthcare was so wonderful, and we were wasting all this money up here, but pretty well consistently, we're spending about half as much as Americans on our healthcare. So,
and that's a problem. The corporations want us to spend more.
They want us to spend more,
it.
particularly on medications, particularly on pharmaceuticals, and maybe we should just move on. And I noticed you wrote one word for a topic you're interested in talking about is vaccines. So
yeah,
it's another element of this corporate sort of agenda that.
Now again, the message keeps coming out from media, and people believe it, and I don't fault people for believing it, that vaccines are safe and effective. Almost like the main message is, the number one message is, you cannot trust or believe the media, and you cannot trust or believe the politicians.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just a sad fact. Where we go from there, I don't know.
Well, the politicians, from what I can tell when I talk to them, a lot of them are quite muddled in their thinking, and it really is quite strange. You think, okay, these are the people that are making the decisions for us. And by the way, a lot of them hold themselves up to be experts in different areas, and they seem to know so much. I prefer not to have experts. Let's just go with some people with some common sense for a change. Anyway, let's touch on another topic here. I want to talk about the Blue Bridge just for a second, because, you know, the Johnson Street Bridge has been, new bridges being built and all that, but still the old structure's still there. Now, apparently, from what I understand, it's possible that that bridge could actually handle a rail line.
Yes, that bridge can handle the rail. So we still have the rail link to downtown. We haven't yet lost it. Ross Crockford said that on the radio a couple of weeks ago. I thought, oh my God, I see the bridge every day. It never occurred to me.
Well, are they going to have to tear
rail
this thing
link has
down?
not yet been
Isn't
lost.
it rusting down? Isn't it going to fall down?
No, the bridge would last forever. The whole story was a pack of nonsense, but we'll talk about that next time.
Well, this
Thank you,
is a
Walter.
thing, just to end on that, Jack, and remind the folks that, hey, there's something we can do here. Rally behind the idea of keeping this Blue Bridge to allow a fixed link or a rail line to come right in from the western communities, right into downtown. Be fantastic for the environment and great for the community.
At least let's look at the idea and see if it makes any sense. Yeah.
Okay, Jack, great pleasure to have you here
Thank you,
today,
Walt.
and looking forward to having you back in the future. So that completes this segment of Citizens Forum.